Hey mom, how's it going?
Linz, I'm having a great start to the day. Just ended up walking the dog. We did not run into the other crazy dogs in the neighborhood, so I consider that a win. I got some exercise in. The dog is happy, and no trauma in the morning. You know how that goes. So, how's your day going?
It's going good. My dog's actually whining at me right now to go on a walk. So sorry if anyone hears him. Hopefully he'll pipe down in a minute, but yeah, it's always good to start the morning with no dog trauma. How about that? That's awesome.
Sometimes it's not possible, but today was a good day.
Yeah. Well, I'm pumped about today's episode because we are having a friend back on the podcast for a round two to chat about agency acquisition and what it actually means for the policyholder in an acquisition and what that experience is like. So, welcome back to the podcast, John. Great to have you.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here. It's funny you talk about dogs because I have a puppy. I have a 10-month-old puppy, and we had to get her we call it the buzzer. And anyway, this thing is magical.
Yeah. We,
John, if
We
it
don't
works, let me
use this
know.
one because it's electric shock, and I just don't think
yeah,
we should
too
go
much.
that far. But this one just makes it buzz, makes the collar buzz,
Yeah,
and
that's
well worth
great.
the well worth the $29 on Amazon, just saying.
So in my
For
husband's
those of you out
family,
there with crazy dogs, yeah.
yeah, in my husband's family, he has an uncle with two bulldogs who are still puppies. I think they just turned 3-ish, maybe 4, but they are insane and they call that the dick collar
Yeah.
because those dogs know when that collar goes on that they will get it's still like a buzz. They don't do the shock either, but
Yeah.
yeah, all you have to do is warn the dick collar's coming out and they're like perfect little
They
angel.
get on there. Yes. Yes. So
Uh,
anyway, not to digress, but yes, I feel you with the crazy, because you couldn't walk her. She would, I mean, she's a little schnauzer. It's this big, and she just would go
Insane.
nuts.
So
She
our dog John is an Aussie Doodle, and we live at a dead end of a road, and there are two white dogs that live at the top of the road, which we can't get out. Like if we want to go for a walk, we have to pass by them. Like there's no two ways around it. And these dogs have something for my dog. They just don't like him, and he's a herder, so he's half Australian Shepherd, half poodle, and he wants to herd us and protect us. And these dogs will run at him, and it's just stressful. Like I just can't even tell you. And no collar in the world will keep him from barking at these dogs. Like if they see each other, it's not good. So I'm kind of feel like I'm covert when I go out. Like, are they out, and can I make it past their house before the dogs are out? And if I do it, it's like a win. And if it's not a very good day. It's
Yeah,
just not a good day. So
so
anyway,
much more stress in our life that we don't need, for
yeah, what in
sure.
the world? And he's like the most passive dog otherwise. He looks like a big teddy bear. So it's just kind of funny that, there's stress, and that the two stressors are these little yippy white dogs that I have no idea why they decided they don't like my dog, but they don't. So it's fine. Whatever. It's all good.
Insanity.
All right.
Well, John, what I wanted to have you on to discuss, because last time I had you on, it was to talk about your 37 agencies in your career that you've acquired, which is a ridiculous number. Has the
Yeah.
number increased since then? Do we need to like update that episode to be like 40,
And
10,
so we
42 and
just
10?
closed on another one that was probably, I don't know, 30 miles south of us, that we're integrating into the agency. Pretty good size one, but yeah, we
So
haven't announced it yet,
38
but
now?
so it's something like that. I don't know. It's a lot. It's
It's
a
a
lot.
when you start to lose count, that's when you know it's a problem.
Yeah.
I saw this LinkedIn post on social media. I forget who posted it, but someone said with all of this activity happening in the industry, that the people who are really losing out are the policyholders, the insureds at the end of the day. I saw it one day. I couldn't stop thinking about it on my afternoon walk, and I was talking to Patrick about it. And I'm like, I just don't think that's true because at the end of the day, independent insurance agencies exist because they want to help their community. So, agencies who are acquiring these agencies, of course, they want to grow. Of course, you want more money, you want to make your business bigger. But I don't think an agency would be able to acquire if they didn't think that their agency would be able to provide a good experience for these clients.
Hmm.
And when I was thinking of people to have on to chat about this and talk about, here, I've acquired agencies, here's what I've done, because of your mass amount of agencies you've acquired, you came to mind. So I'd love to hear, like, what is that process for you? How do you think the client interacts differently with your agency than maybe some of the agencies you've acquired? Would love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah. No, I think the biggest thing is, the long-term plan for what the agency and how the agency is going to fit into the organization is key, because there are folks out there that buy agencies and the thought is that they come in and they remove support and they remove people, and sometimes they basically just buy the accounts and and try to hold on. And
Mm-hmm.
that's never been our goal or our mindset amongst any of the agencies that we've bought. Even the agencies that we've had people come to us and say, "Hey, here are the keys, I'm leaving." That's even that situation is not something that we um, don't have a plan for going forward. So, sometimes each agency's been different. So it's a really tough question to answer specifically. But I think, nowadays the multiples that they're paying for these agencies, is 10, 15 times earnings. Well, that means you're not going to make any profit until you hold these agencies for 15 years. Well, it doesn't make any sense to go in and buy an agency and fire everybody and hope that that client just pays that renewal.
Exactly.
That doesn't make any, I don't think that makes sense. And I'm not saying that's what, some agencies plan to do. I think that some of them sort of do that at the end of the day, but they don't necessarily, that wasn't their plan per se.
Yeah. Well, at that point, it's
So
kind of like you basically just bought a lead list, right? Like you have no relationship with the client. Why would you buy basically a lead list for 15 times? Doesn't make
yeah,
much
Okay,
sense.
wait,
yeah, I
before we
think it,
keep
it
talking
definitely
about 10 and
matters.
15 times, I want to make sure we clarify that for the listeners before we get flooded with calls. Just make sure. We're not talking 10 to 15 times revenue, and we're not talking that every agency can command 10 to 15 times EBITDA. We're talking about large agencies that are being bought by PE can command double-digit multiples of EBITDA. Just to make
Yeah.
sure we're all clear here. And the last thing I want is I heard on your podcast that I can make 15 times revenue and I'm in a world of hurt. So
Yeah.
just to be clear. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
No
I don't,
worries. I just want to make sure everybody hears us the right way. Yes.
yeah,
So,
no, sorry about that. I think that, yeah, I mean, I know that there's folks out there that talk in revenue multiples, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, to me, it's what does the EBITDA piece look like? And
but
and
here's
we've
the
had,
here
we've bought agencies at three times, let's call it three times revenue, that the EBITDA was a totally different number and totally in line with, certain situations, and the revenue, sounds like it was three times revenue sounds, or four times revenue sounds like a big number. But at the end of the day, it really wasn't that big of a number because of the earnings. And I think that it's a good point, Carrie, because I think that speaks to what the plan is for after you buy these.
That's right.
That's the biggest thing. And Lindsay, that's the thing that people really need to understand is, what is the plan? How do you take an agency that you've just purchased, and how do you handle the branding piece? A lot of that question comes up, and we have the same issues of, I did business with Cindy, who was there 40 years, and Cindy's no longer going to be there, but I am used to dealing with Cindy and that brand. I think you better have a plan for who is going to replace Cindy, and how they're going to replace Cindy, because it can be a great opportunity for the right person to go in and manage a branch or take over a legacy type situation. But you better have the right person, and they better understand what it is that you're asking them to do. Because we've had agencies that we've bought, and you're going to have a certain percentage of those clients that are just, they fight it. They fight it from the very beginning. And a lot of times there's not much you can do about that. There's not much you can do about that certain percentage of client that is just mad at everything involved. We
They don't
had
like
one the other
change,
day.
right? They just don't like the change,
They
right?
don't like to change. We had one the other day that somebody called from our Gainesville office to one of the other offices clients, and it's a small town agency. It's in Perry, Florida, which is a tiny little town, Mayberry. And the complaint from the client was, who is this person calling me from that other area code? And they're like, well, that's just, support team for us here in Perry. And she talked through it really well. She said, listen, yes, this is somebody from a different town, but they're here to support us and what we're doing here in Perry. And, the client just, they didn't like it, but they at least understood it, that
Yeah.
they at least, hey, we're still here. We still have an office. It's a little town, that kind of thing. So, the answer to your question is, I think you're just going to have a strategy for how do we handle it? How do we handle the branding? What is in it for the client? A lot of times they don't understand when you purchase an agency, there may be markets that are now available that weren't available before. So, you got to communicate that to the client in the perspective of the clients. Hey, what's in it for me? Well, here's what it's in it for you. We now have access to Tower Hill, I don't know, as an example, but they're different carriers, and Tower Hill is a competitive market in your area that you didn't have access to before. So there's more on the menu. The menu's gotten bigger for you, Mr. Client, than was before. Okay, well then, that typically makes the client understand why and what's going on.
So, John, I know that it's not a one size fits all. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
like you've done all of these things and you have to assess the acquisition and the approach to talking to the clients based on the situation with that particular acquisition. But give us some examples of the ways you've communicated to clients to help soften that change or soften their apprehension during an acquisition. Can you just share a couple of examples of how you've gone about doing that and how the exiting owner was part of or not part of that process?
Yeah, so a lot of times we write the letter, the standard letter that goes out, that is something we historically send one time, because I don't care if you send it 100 times, they're not going to read it. Most people don't even understand it. So really it comes down to the people that are going to work this book of business. Is it the people that were there before? Did we retain staff that were there? How do we help them describe, and what do we want the staff to say to that client that picks up on, hey, this used to be the Smith agency, but now it's Darr Schackow, or now, we're going through the same thing with Liberty. Liberty Company owns our agency. Well, nobody that I've sold insurance to in the last 30 years, they think it's Liberty Mutual, the carrier.
Right. Right.
So we typically will slowly introduce that brand to the client base over time. And the key bridge to when we close on the agency to where we get the agency rebranded is the people, the client, the account managers, the customer service reps, the agents, who's going to be working this book. And we make sure that they understand, how do we talk about this process? How do we have conversations with people as they call in, or when you have somebody that asks the question, what's the talk track around what we're trying to accomplish and why we're doing this and what's in it for the client? Nobody cares about the agency owner. Nobody cares about even the account managers or the CSRs. All they really care about is them and what they're getting out of this deal. And that's really what we try to focus on is what do they get? One of the agencies that we just bought is a middle market agency. So they deal with much larger accounts than we typically have dealt with our whole career. Well, that's hard being that, that agency does loss control differently. They do a lot of things that middle market agencies do that we really haven't done. So what we try to communicate to them is, hey, in this situation, hey, the agent that wrote the policy is not leaving. He's staying. Everything is staying the same. The difference is we're going to support him and try to give him more access to you, the client, than he's had before because he was running the admin side, he was running accounting, and he was doing so much other things than just being your agent, your advisor, your risk partner. So, that's what we talk about. And that's the truth of the matter is we're going to take some of that off of his plate that he's done historically and have him focus on his clients more so than he's ever had before. And it helps us. We want him to teach us how do we do middle market in North Florida? How
That's
does it
right.
work? How did you build your business? How did you get these clients? What opportunities are out there? So that's pretty unique in that we bought an agency that was a middle market agency, and we historically weren't. We're an old nationwide agency that dealt with the hardware store and the bakery and the Main Street business, and then we wrote a lot of personal lines. So, I would imagine most of the people that watch your podcast are personal lines, probably smaller agencies, that kind of thing. To speak to their situation, if they were going to buy an agency, don't be in a hurry to rebrand. Don't be in a hurry to send out that letter that says, hey, we were Smith Agency and now we're Jones Mega Incorporated, because there's no, unless you explain to them the value of what it is you're getting the client, what Mr. Customer are you getting out of this deal? You're wasting your breath. They're not listening. They're not, it's the old saying, are they
Right.
tuned into the IFM? What's in it for me? Your
Yeah.
clients are tuned into what's in it for them, not you. So don't focus so much on what it means to you. Focus on what does it mean to your client who may have, one homeowner's policy. Well, it would seem to me what a great opportunity to introduce the fact that, maybe now the agency that you've bought has access to auto owners or travelers or Liberty Mutual or, they didn't have before. Make sure that you communicate that. And it starts really with the staff for the first 6 months to a year. The staff needs to understand and know that talk track. And
Yeah.
then you can change after a year. If you have to change the branding, or if you want to change the branding, you can. It's a little easier. But in that first year, it really is about trying to get the staff to
Yeah.
communicate it to your clients.
I think one of the areas in which independent agencies can shine is in claims. When a claim happens, we are a family agency, we're going to be there for you, like that whole narrative behind an independent agency. It's tough though because everyone has a different process. So we've talked a lot about, what's in it for me and you might have different carriers and you might be able to, get a rate reduction. But do you have a standard claims process that everyone adheres to once they're acquired? Or do you keep old claims processes, and how's that communicated to new clients? Because I can only imagine 2 months after you acquire an agency, if there's a major claim and the person doesn't know where to go, or the old way is, like I can only imagine that would be a, a really big problem.
Yeah, that is. Sorry, I'm on a podcast. Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
good.
So a lot of that has to do with, if the agency you're purchasing it has some sort of claims process that you guys don't follow, you have to decide whether you're going to continue doing that or not. We don't necessarily have a hard and fast claims process per se. Like a lot of the folks that file claims, we get reports and that sort of thing, but we don't necessarily have a standardized process, and maybe we should. So what we would do in that situation is try to work through, and if there's a claims process is coming from the agency that we've purchased, we try to keep it if we can't. Like if that's part of it, that we don't change anything on that side and until we fully integrate the agency and figure out, okay, maybe this is something we need to do throughout the rest of the agency, or maybe it's something that we can't afford to do anymore, or don't want to do. One of the things that we do run into, probably more so than on the claims than anything else, is the late pay process. So
Okay.
one of the, that can be a really tricky situation when you've got, hey, this client, you know, has a full-time staff person that all they do is call late pays. Eesh, we don't do that. So how do we figure out, how do we either end that program, which is going to be painful and you could have E&O situations there,
Right.
or how do we start a new one, or start, whatever. That's a tough answer. I don't know that there's any one way to handle that other than, art. Sorry, am I going in and out?
Nope, you're
No,
good.
you're
Okay.
clear.
I think you're
So
right
other
though,
than,
John. There's lots of processes inside each of the organizations that create the customer experience. And you got to know what those are and which ones you are, I mean, even all the way down to accepting cash or walk-ins or whatever. Like you got to know what you're getting into, because some of it is a deal breaker and it shouldn't be an acquisition, because that's not something you're going to be able to accommodate. And your customers' expectations will drive their behavior. So if they expect you to do something that you're not able to do, it could change it. So not this boils down to not every buyer's right for every seller and not every seller's right for every buyer. And asking some of these cultural questions will actually solve the challenge or the perspective that the customer loses, when in fact it could be the customer's not actually losing, Lindsay, but the buyer didn't dig in and figure out what the customer expectations are. Therefore, their retention suffered because they didn't do their homework.
Absolutely.
They looked at that top line revenue and they said, this agency is worth this. I can afford it. It's going to do X, Y, and Z for my agency. They might have even looked at the staff and said, I need talent and they have some talent that would actually help me. And then let's close this deal. Well, that's really not, you have to go a little deeper to make sure that deals are going to actually work and the customer is going to win in the deal. Right. Like that's
Absolutely.
really the bottom line. John, you're giving great examples of, different processes, but oftentimes we don't go that deep as buyers and sellers. Right.
yeah, so you got to be prepared to, as they say, punt in certain
Yeah.
situations, and that's, for somebody that's out there trying to buy their first agency and all that kind of stuff, I would be very careful with, the whole thing, because there's a lot more moving parts than it seems.
For
And
sure.
I would recommend to somebody that's buying their first agency, don't buy one that is even 50% as big as your own agency. Start
Mm.
slow and buy a small one. Try to work a deal with, you know, a local smaller agency or something like that, that if you guys merged or combined forces, you can gain some strength there.
Yeah. Yeah. But think about the customer, and from the customer's perspective also, not just your perspective or the buyer's perspective or the seller's perspective, but you got to think about it from the customer's perspective. So that LinkedIn post, I'm not sure who wrote it. I'm not sure why they wrote it, but I do believe that there are some situations where the customer probably felt like they lost in this, and it was because maybe the buyer and seller weren't congruent and they really don't
Absolutely.
operate the same way. You know what I'm saying? So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway,
But
yeah.
thank you for coming on and sharing all those insights. I think that they're incredibly important for, like, a lot of our listeners haven't done 38 acquisitions. They're on one,
Yeah,
maybe two, maybe under five.
sure.
So I think these lessons and, reflections from someone who's done so many and has had so much experience with it are really helpful for the agencies who are just starting out. So
I
thanks for
love it.
coming
Sure.
on.
Well, John, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on again. You ladies have a wonderful week.
You do the same.
All right. Talk to you soon.